All right, we are underway. Doug Evans, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, happy to be here, Jeremy.
And this has been a long time coming. And actually, I can say this with complete honesty, but you, Doug Evans, have changed my life. You have altered my diet and the way I do things day to day. So thanks for that. And I'm looking forward to diving into all of that.
Yeah, well, makes me feel. I always said if I can influence one person, then my life would be meaningful. So I feel very grateful that you said that.
Yeah. And you actually slid into my email inbox randomly and said something like, "Hey, man, can I send you a book?" And I was like, "A book about sprouts? That's weird and quirky. And sure, I've never read a book about sprouts." And then we got connected on Instagram, and here we are. But for those who do not know anything about you, Doug, like, what's your story? How do you describe yourself? Who are you?
Yeah, I consider myself an artist, and I've autodidactic, so not formally trained in school, but I think very educated with life experiences. I grew up in lower middle class in New York City. Um, I was a terrible student. I was a juvenile delinquent in my teens. I painted graffiti on subway trains. When I turned 17 years old, I joined the 82nd Airborne Army to get disciplined, jump out of planes, run through the woods. I then became interested in graphic design, which was a legitimate form of graffiti. And I worked for one of the top graphic designers in the world for 7 years as an unpaid intern apprentice so that I could master some skills while I had to support myself doing side hustles like working in bars, restaurants, nightclubs, supermarkets. And I did that literally until this man died. His name was Paul Rand. He designed IBM, ABC, UPS, Westinghouse, and he did the next corporate identity for Steve Jobs after Steve left Apple the first time. And so that was my world. And I was in that world until 1999, when my mother had died of cancer. My father died of heart disease. My aunt got diabetes and they amputated both of her feet below her ankles. My brother developed type 2 diabetes, became morbidly obese, had 3 strokes and a heart attack. And that was kind of my come to sprout moment, right? That was like, whoa, am I genetically cursed, or is everyone around me just eating a poisonous, toxic life, like foods, lifestyle?
And so, just going back to your New York City upbringing, what was causing the juvenile delinquency or the vandalism?
I
Like,
think you know, I didn't feel, it, I have different theories on it. One is I think there were inconsistencies and incongruencies in the house. So I just didn't feel very safe or seen, in my house. Not that my parents, may they rest in peace, not that they didn't love me, but I didn't feel very understood or nurtured. So I was looking for excitement. I was looking for adventure. I was seeking the adrenaline rush. Like nothing was more fun than running from the police, right? Or doing something where you could get caught, you might not get caught, like living on the edge.
mm,
So that was a degree in which I was very comfortable being until I started to see my friends dropping like flies, right? Going to jail, you know, um, dying. Um, and when I was 17, I had the kind of awareness and appreciation that I was more than this, right? That I was more than this. And I didn't want to live, that same, I didn't want to die and I didn't want to live like a degenerative lifestyle. And I felt that I was not in control. Like I couldn't control this on my own. So therefore, I had to make changes. And the only way I thought of that was to join the military. Like the military was going to be my way out. And so that's what happened in a nutshell.
Yeah. Were you in a military family or did you have
No,
pressure from?
not at all.
So this was kind of an out of the blue random decision.
I think so. It was
Wow.
it was I saw, the movie Private Benjamin, and the army looked like it could be fun, right? MASH, Private Benjamin. And then also I felt like I could get the Army College Fund, so I'd have, a path out. And then I also thought that the Army would teach me discipline. And so I was really craving discipline because I had none. Like no one could tell me what to do. And I thought the Army would provide that.
And did you get what you came for?
I mean, it was the biggest wake up call of my life. Like, having been able to talk myself in or out of anything all the time, but not now here, unable, to even express myself, to explain myself. Like you'd open up your mouth and they'd scream at you, they'd be in your face, and it was over. Like it was over.
Dang. How long were you in for?
I had signed up for 3 years, and I got honorably discharged earlier than that for complexities with my prior life prior to joining the military.
Do you mind expanding on that? I'm just intrigued. Like
Yeah.
complexities.
So um, when I was in the Army, I was so like first day, second day, third day, I wanted out. Like I thought like I was done. Like I did not want to be there. I wanted to go home. And they told me there's no way out. That once you sign the paperwork, you are an indentured servant. And that there's no bars on the windows. And if you leave, you could leave, but then you'd go AWOL, and then you'd be a fugitive. And eventually you would get caught. And then it would be really miserable. So the like no way out thing. So in those first days in the military, I made a commitment that I was going to do my best. Like I was a grown man, I was just going to do my best. So I just sucked it up to whatever they told me to do. And they said, run 1 mile, I would run two. I would not be just a kiss ass, but I would be overly enthusiastic, over the top. And after 13 months of going the extra mile, infantry training, airborne training, combat engineer training, special forces, explosives and demolitions training, unit armor training, and taking massive amounts of initiative and demonstrating leadership, I got nominated to go to officer candidate school, which was a huge shift, like a huge shift, because it's very rare that an enlisted soldier kind of crosses over into that realm of being an officer. Normally, all the officers either are college educated, they went to West Point, they did ROTC in college, and so it was very rare that that happened. But I guess my commanding officer saw initiative in me and felt that I would be the role. And lo and behold, a few weeks later, the commanding officer calls me in and reads this like list of activities and sheets and things about my past. Now, some were mine, some weren't. And as we're going through the list, did you do this? Yes. Did you do this? And then said, did you disclose these prior offenses to your when you signed up to your recruiter? And I said, absolutely. And there was no outstanding offenses. There was no warrants for my arrest. There wasn't even open parking tickets. But the fact that the recruiter said, oh, you were a juvenile, your record was sealed, none of those things matter, was aligned with the recruiter's goal of filling boots. So, and for 99.9% of enlisted troops who would never get a top secret security clearance, who would never go to become officers, it wouldn't have mattered. But my initiative, which caused me to excel, caused a deep dive into my past, which I thought was clear and sealed. But it turns out that a sealed record doesn't mean they seal it up with tape and file it away. It means they have a seal on it that says juvenile. And there's no such thing as a sealed record, with the military. And there were no, like I said, there was no egregious offenses. These were all trivial. And the commanding officer said, I have orders from the commander of the army to discharge you. And I said, for what? He said, fraudulent enlistment. And then he proceeded to read that fraudulent enlistment weakens enlistment standards and rewards dishonesty. And I said, well, what does this mean? He goes, you will be discharged within the next 2-week period from the military. And I could not contain my joy and excitement to be getting out 23 months early. So I'm keeping my poker face, hoping that he doesn't change my mind, hoping he doesn't get a congressional pardon so that I could stay in longer. I'm like, oh, I'm so, like, whatever you have to do, I accept my fate. And the irony, and I know you love irony, Jeremy, he says to me, I can give you one of 3 discharges, and a dishonorable discharge, I can give you a general discharge, or I can give you an honorable discharge. And I'm like hoping to get like the general discharge, right? Realizing like, yeah, I did mess up. I made the mistake. Maybe I was led down the primrose path, but I made the mistake. I'm not a victim. I made the mistake. And he says, I'm going to give you an honorable discharge, Private Evans, and I'm going to give you an Army Achievement Medal for your meritorious service under my command. And pack your bags, eat as regular, do not come to any formation, any other activities. You are officially relieved of any duties and any responsibilities. So the next 2 weeks, I was just hanging out, waiting for my final orders to come to take me away.
Wow, man. That seems like a huge transition there where you thought your life was going one way and then you have one conversation and suddenly it's a hard right turn and everything's different.
Yeah, that's what happens. It's called life.
And so life happens, you get out of the military, and then that's when you began that graphic design chapter.
Exactly. So that's when, I went to Barnes and Noble, think about what to do. I'm working now in bars, restaurants, after hours clubs, like anything to make a living. And the idea of going to college without the Army College Fund, and just felt like, just doesn't feel like I had felt that in that 13 months, even though, I wasn't at war, I wasn't deployed overseas, it felt like hell. And I felt much more mature than the average freshman college student, even though I was in the same age group. So it just didn't feel like something I was aligned or motivated to participate in.
Yeah. And so then how did you go from being graphic design intern man to healthy, nutritious sprout dude?
Yeah, it's a great question. So here I am, working in graphic design, working with computers. My life is going terrific. And then I watched my aunt get diabetes and they chopped off her feet below her ankles. I watched my mother, drop 50% of her body weight and then die from stomach cancer, within months. I watched my father get a minor back procedure and then an epidural, and then had a heart attack and be misdiagnosed in the hospital, basically left to die in the emergency room because, that's what happens in emergency rooms. And then I watched my brother basically eat himself into obesity, type 2 diabetes. I think now he probably has type 3 diabetes, early signs of dementia and Alzheimer's, and then have 3 strokes and a heart attack. And so I'm watching all of this around me while I'm, comfortable 35, 36 pounds overweight, eating anything because now I'm successful, so I could afford to go to a steakhouse, to go to a seafood restaurant, to go to an Italian restaurant, to eat fast food when I wanted fast food, to eat desserts unlimited. And so I'm eating all this stuff and I'm operating on adrenaline. So I don't really feel like lethargic, but I'm operating this way. But then, after I buried my father, it felt like, wow, what's going on here? Like something feels like wrong. Like maybe I'm genetically cursed. Like maybe I'm going to die like them. And then random encounter with my first vegan friend, and I never even heard the term vegan before. She said, "Oh, Doug, it's not your genes. It's your lifestyle. You are living a toxic, carcinogenic, heart disease laden lifestyle. And if you don't change, you will end up like everyone else in your family. But don't think that it's your genes. It's your lifestyle." And so within a 2-week period from that encounter in April 1999, I went from eating anything, literally anything. And the more gnarly it was, the better. I remember going to the carnivore restaurant in downtown Nairobi and eating like a piece of gazelle, like literally in the carnivore restaurant. And to then saying, okay, vegetarian, vegan, raw vegan in a 2-week period. And the more I got into that, the more every bit of it resonated. Like the information just resonated as the truths that I wish I learned and read earlier in my life. And so, and that was 23 and a half years ago. And I said, okay, I'm done. I'm no longer going to do this. And then I was still kind of working in the graphics world. And then I don't know if you've done psychedelics, but I kind of had this like ego death moment where I could no longer do work for things that I wasn't like aligned and finding meaningful. Like, there are some companies that are like outright like bad, right? Just bad companies selling toxic things, right? Call it tobacco companies or alcohol companies, right? And then there's companies that I would consider just more neutral, like the AT&Ts and the Verizons of the world. And then there were companies that, back then there weren't triple bottom line, B Corps doing things. And I just felt like, like it was like I didn't want to do that anymore. Like I wanted to take what I had learned and share it. And so I had a partner then who was vegan, and we formed, this little company called Organic Avenue in New York to create products that we wanted to eat, right? Where everything was fresh, ripe, raw, plant-based, made with fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, seaweed, sprouts, fermented, cultured items, bottled in glass, no additives, no preservatives, no fillers, no food coloring. Like our world was anything in our store I could eat enthusiastically and I could feel comfortable sharing with anybody. Like there was no excuses.
Okay. And so then you just decided to start a vegan, is it a
Yeah,
cafe?
raw vegan, like little juice bar cafe. And then we opened up 10 of them in New York City called Organic Avenue.
Oh shit. And so that must have felt scary, I imagine, to go from a graphic design world to then I'm opening a vegan cafe in New York City.
No,
No?
there was no fear whatsoever. There was just like this compulsion of like, oh, this is so important. I will find my way to do it. And I like solving problems. I like mystery. So I would just do whatever it takes in order to make, to get it done.
Yeah. You just felt completely aligned and on the right path, and this is where I'm supposed to be. Is that
Yeah,
fair?
correct.
Gotcha. Okay, so you started a sort of little vegan empire in New York City with this chain of Organic Avenue, it was called.
Correct.
Okay, so you started to imagine make a name for yourself as a healthy, conscious, speaking in the nutrition and diet space kind of area. And
Yes.
then how did that go? What happened next?
That
I
was
feel like
great.
I feel like this
We
is like
we ended
Netflix
up,
when I'm just like watching new episodes of Doug Evans. Like, okay, I love the military episode. That was cool. And now we got the
yeah.
vegan episode.
So the next episode was really good. Um, we sold the business, profitable, successful acquisition. All of our investors made money. I made some money, and then I went down this crazy, wild rabbit hole um, with Silicon Valley, which would be like literally a Netflix story in and of itself, like the story of Juicero, and where Juice Guy goes to Silicon Valley, raises $120 million to create a $700 juicer for rich assholes. And you don't need the juicer at all because you could squeeze the pack by hand and the business gets composted, within a year of launching. So, and every bit of information, that caused the demise of the business was all like part of representative of the toxic media culture. Gotcha. Like I was canceled for making a juicer 5 years ago, 6 years ago, before the cancel culture, because people didn't want to see a successful vegan, making a juicer. So I became a target, and they made up these stories of what was that you could squeeze the pack by hand was as absurd as saying you could take an espresso pod and pour hot water over the pod and get a cup of espresso, and not realizing that the original Nespresso machine cost $1,500 when you could be putting coffee beans in boiling water. Or you could take like my lovely organic Industry of All Nations hoodie, and you could wash this in the sink with less soap, less water, and faster than using a washing machine. So there was nothing to it other than, the media controlling a false narrative. But that experience in that chapter, which I've talked about on other podcasts, which was the best experience of my life. Like, how privileged was I to come up with an idea, to hire a few hundred people, to launch a product that sold out the first version, sold over 1 million packs. The business was growing 20% month over month over month, hit $1 million in revenue in our first few months of launching. It was all phenomenal. And then only to see that in the world, that there is a big brother. There is like an ability for organizations on the other side to collaborate and conspire to, cause things that they don't want or they don't believe in or they don't understand to disappear. And when I was in the military, and I was a graffiti writer, I'd been punched in the face, but I never experienced quote unquote white collar Machiavellianism. Like, just wasn't even in my realm of consciousness. Like, you think these are good people, everyone's good, people want to tell the truth. And, like, I'm not saying there's evil in the world, but there's a lot of pain in the world. And there's a lot of people that operate not from the heart, not thinking about the consequences of their actions, not thinking about, deep understanding and truth seeking. So that actually created the opportunity. It liberated me from that business, the demise of it, to go to Burning Man for my first time, to explore psychedelics, whether it was ketamine or 5-MeO toad or psilocybin, what have you, and which kind of widens the aperture of what was going on, to shift from victim into victor, and from being able to see within every adversity lies the seed of a greater or equivalent benefit. And that seed of greater equivalent benefit was me moving to the desert. And you see over my shoulder, I'm in the Mojave Desert. And I'm here, and being in the desert, wanting to be raw vegan, made me realize not only am I in the desert, I'm in a food desert. And that I needed to figure out a way to sustain myself. And that way turned out to be sprouts and sprouting and seeds, and began a whole new chapter of my life.
Man, you've lived a life, Doug Evans.
I'm living a life. I mean, I'm still a young guy. I'm
Yeah.
56 years old, so I got a whole
Yeah.
life ahead of me.
Yeah. So you go to Silicon Valley, have this amazing, successful company, get sort of canceled publicly. And I imagine that public quote unquote failure or collapse was in itself full of gold nuggets and lessons and expansive growth opportunities. And then you go to Burning Man, do some drugs, have some realizations,
I
move to
call it
the
medicine.
yeah,
Medicine.
fair. Um, do some medicine, move to the desert, and start sprouting. And then you end up writing a book about sprouting. And is
Yeah.
that take us to the present moment approximately?
Well, the book became, out of the 3.2 million books on Amazon, the Sprout book hit number 69 of all books on Amazon. It became the number one best-selling vegetarian book, vegan book, low-budget cookbook, fiber book on Amazon. And so, well beyond the publisher's wildest expectations. For me, I thought it was a good book. I wrote the book. It was a really hard journey to write, 60,000 words, 288 pages. That was really hard for me, but the words were coming out of me. I would sit in a disciplined way and write 500 words a day, banged out the book. I interviewed 10 of the top medical professionals in the United States: Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. Oz, Dr. Dean Ornish, Dr. Axe, Dr. Joel Furman, Dr. Kahn, like all of these people. Now, interesting, some of them were plant-based. Some were functional medicine. Some, like Dr. Axe, wrote the keto book. And the thing that they all had in common were sprouts. And the more I looked into sprouts, the more I go down the sprout rabbit hole, just the more blown away I am at the power of nature, the power of seeds, the power of sprouts, And I got the entire download for the Sprout book, like in one like soaking session in my hot spring, looking at the stars, that could be summarized to three things. Number one, sprouts are vegetables, where most people think of them as a garnish. Number two, sprouts were vitamins and minerals. And number three, sprouts were medicine, that you could treat most major chronic and acute illnesses with some form of sprout therapy. That broccoli sprouts contained a compound, or the precursor to a compound called sulforaphane, which has been proven to kill cancer cells, to detoxify benzene from the lungs, to create heat shock proteins in people suffering from autism, which lessen the symptoms of autism. And the list goes on, that sprouts, due to their high fiber content, low fat content, are an incredible food for weight loss, for regulating insulin levels in diabetics. So I went down this world from being kind of an evangelist for raw veganism to going deep into the science of nutritional biochemistry all around seeds and sprouts. And that's how I spend the greater portion of my day. It's like learning more about the healing benefits of the sprouts, the nutrition benefits of the sprouts. I bought a Kindle just so I could download the white papers and read them on the paper white and just go deeper and deeper. And I invited Dr. Jed Fahey, the father of broccoli sprouts, to be the head of my scientific advisory board. So I'm going deep into the science and the data myself. And Dr. Jed and my associate in the Netherlands, Jack, published our first peer-reviewed paper on sprout safety that came out last November. So we spent a year writing this paper, studying the data, because there was a misnomer that sprouts weren't safe, or there could be E. coli or salmonella. And so I wanted to know what the truth was. So, which is why Dr. Jed and Jack downloaded all data from the CDC for the last quarter century for illnesses, outbreaks, hospitalizations, and deaths across all categories of food, to come to the pleasant and desirable conclusion that sprouts were as safe, if not safer, than any other food that you could eat.
Oh man, that's amazing.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, and I remember really liking your book and being sort of annoyed that I liked it so much. At the same time, I was like, I'm reading a book about sprouts and I'm loving this. And I'm also questioning my own I'm questioning my own knowledge. I'm questioning my own actions, and I'm intrigued to try this. And it sounded fun. And I call it kitchen farming. That's the way that I describe it
Yeah,
to my following, of like, oh, I'm kitchen farming, and I have a jar. And it's, Doug, I know that you know this, but for those listening, it's so easy. I'm a very lazy man. It is like the easiest thing in the world. You just scoop a couple spoonfuls of seeds into a jar with the screen, and you fill it with water and empty it a couple times a day, and it lives in my dish rack. And I have vegetables at my fingertips. And the
yeah.
first time I did it, I was like, I had this eureka moment, which I'm sure you've had, and many people have told you this, but I had this eureka moment of like, why is everybody not doing this? This
Yeah,
makes
that's the moment.
sense. I don't
Yeah.
get it.
I mean, it was really interesting, but it's also, you've come a long way also, because I remember, an exchange that we had in August of 2021. And I
Uh-huh.
wrote, you're saying, I got my first jar in the kitchen now. I'll be spreading the word. And I go, that's awesome. Let's do an Instagram live at your convenience. And you wrote back, mung bean success. I actually don't love doing live, so we'll humbly pass on that idea.
Yeah. I was like, nah, I remember that. And I remember feeling bad, but I also remember feeling good that I was honoring my boundaries of like, I'm not excited to do an Instagram live with this dude, and I need to say so. But since then, to your credit and to your point, I bought more jars. I get excited shopping online, the different flavors of seed varieties. I've got
Yeah.
my girlfriend into it and she loves it. And I have been preaching pretty regularly on Instagram about it. And then I can't remember why, but you popped into my feed and I got really excited. And I was like, Doug would be great for a podcast, not an Instagram live, but like, let's actually record a podcast. I'd love to get to know him better. And let's put the word out about anything that you want to talk about, really. And so it's been a long, winding route for me personally, but there's no going back. Like, I can't not do it now.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's so, the fact is like, and maybe I'll take a moment to
Please.
define sprouting, right? So every plant on the planet begins with a seed, and that seed is naturally preserved and can have a long shelf life for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And then nature has a mechanism to trigger germination, right? To remove the enzyme inhibitors, the trypsins, the phytic acids, and stimulate the growth of that seed into a vegetable. And that germination sprouting process occurs with water. And so if you add too much water, you actually will drown the seed, because you need to have enough water to trigger the germination without drowning it. And so it's a process that you go through, and then it needs more water to continue to grow. But the fascinating, amazing thing about nature is that the seed will turn into a sprout, will grow 10 times its size without soil, without sunshine, without fertilizer, and it's doing it in days. So it's like nature's cheat code, because I was able to live on exclusively sprouts for like 30 days at a time, just by having seeds, having water, growing them, and you're getting incredible nutritional diversity, that every single benefit of the whole food, plant-based diet can be achieved through the consumption of sprouts, that you get every micronutrient, every phytonutrient, every prebiotic, antioxidant, bioflavonoid, polyphenol, amino acid to form complete proteins. They're all in sprouts.
I love that. I have no idea what some of those things are, but my takeaway is they're super healthy and they're super beneficial and they're super easy to make and it costs hardly anything. And to your point there about the germination process, I think it's really fun. Like there's
Yeah.
something really awe-inspiring to chuck a bunch of seeds in a jar and then in a day or two have it be filled with life and you get to watch them grow. It's very surreal, but also very rewarding, I find.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I think it's really a miracle. And my mission, is to educate, enable, and support people on this process, because we have major global issues right now. Like we've got, aside from uh, debatable climate, controversy, right? Deforestation is real, right? Deforestation is real. Animal agriculture is consuming 10 times the amount of plants than humans are. So for every 1 calorie of plants that are grown, that are fed to humans, 10 are fed to animals for the purpose of meat production. That it takes about 1,500 gallons of water to water the cow, water the vegetation that they feed the cow for this multi-year period until the non-humane slaughter of that creature. And 1,500 gallons of water, conservative estimate, where you can grow a gallon of water will grow 1 pound of sprouts. Like it's that extraordinary the use of efficiency. The fact that you could grow them without soil or sunshine is also extraordinary, and that they can grow in almost any environment. The warmer it is, the faster they grow, the cooler it is, the slower they grow. But pretty much I'm now seeing, my social media, which when we met back in April 2021, I had very few followers. I wasn't on TikTok. I had a few thousand followers on Instagram. And now I have over 150,000 followers on Instagram, over 185,000 on TikTok. And I've been on podcasts, that have probably had well over 10 million downloads at this point. So people are really resonating with this message. And so that's one, right? We've got the environmental part. We also have the fact that, do you know how many people die of starvation annually in our world that we're living in 2023?
Way too many is my.
Tens of millions of people
Yeah.
are dying annually. And I don't know if you've ever been hungry, but dying of starvation is a shitty death, right? It's really shitty. And a lot of people, so call it 10,000 people a day are dying of starvation. In the United States, we have almost 100 million people that are pre-diabetic. We have 2 out of 3 people that are overweight or obese. We still have heart disease as being the #1 killer. We have all sorts of cancer down to level of specificities that are beyond, calculations. And most of these deaths are lifestyle oriented. So when I look at the US dietary guidelines recommend 7 to 13 servings of fruits and vegetables every day, a serving being like an 8-ounce size or a fist. If you're eating that correctly, there's really no room for anything else, right? And their guidelines allow French fries or ketchup to be in it. What I've done was I have really high standards. I want things to be really fresh. And sprouts are really fresh. Like if you go buy produce, where are you physically now, Jeremy?
I'm in Squamish, British Columbia.
So you're in British Columbia. If you get produce from your health food store or your supermarket, it could be a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks old, depending on where the farm was, where the harvest was, etc. When you're growing sprouts, you're eating a fresh crop every day. I mean, that's how amazing it is. And instead of shipping around produce that is heavy, that requires refrigeration, that is decaying and dying on the way, you could buy seeds that are shelf stable. You can add the water, you can nurture it, and you get the benefit, and you're the recipient of that fresh produce.
Yeah. It's funny. When I first started doing this, I remember saying to my girlfriend that the sprouts were almost too fresh and too crunchy. Like I had to get used to them being what they should be, because the ones I would buy in the store are a little bit softer, they fall apart, they're wobbly. And it took me getting used to freshness. It was like a growing pain, so to speak.
Yeah, I love freshness.
Yeah, man, obviously I'm converted, you're converted. Hopefully it comes across to the audience that this is worth, what would it take to get going, $15?
Yeah,
10
even
bucks?
less. You could start with something along the lines of getting any mason jar, getting cheesecloth and a rubber band, and buying some seeds, sample pack. Like you could get started really inexpensively. And if you pool together your resources with your friends, you could be buying bulk. I mean, there's any way to do this, but that's what I'm seeing, this whole momentum of people like being tuned in, turned on, and like, if you were to buy, I could show you, I buy my seeds in 35-pound buckets, right? 35-pound buckets. And for you Canadians, that's probably 14 kilos, right? You're getting big buckets and they're really inexpensive. So you can give out the seeds and everyone can participate in the growth.
Yeah, I remember doing the math on it the first time I did it because I was still skeptical. I was like, all right, this Doug Evans guy, he sounds smart but quirky, and I don't know about this. And I ran some math and it was like, oh, this batch of sprouts that I would pay, and I do pay $6 for in the supermarket, cost me like 15 to 25 cents or something
Yeah.
insane. And it's
Yeah.
yeah, and
Well,
it's in
that,
my kitchen and it's better and fresher, etc.
yeah, I mean, look, this is 2023 is the year of the sprout revolution. Like this is all happening right now. And I love that you're, tuned in and turned on to this.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's fun, man. And I've told friends about it. I've got friends doing it. I'm like in my social media, I'm asking people like, do you kitchen farm yet? Why aren't you kitchen farming? And trying to spread the word because from my perspective, it's all upside. It's all pros. There's virtually no cons, you know? It's literally 2 minutes a day, maybe. Once you've got it going, it's
Yeah,
nothing.
it's very quickly. I did a video the other day where I'm holding the baby in one hand and I nurtured four of my sprouting jars, the big 64-ounce ones, with the baby while I'm doing the video, narrating it. And it took me 2 minutes to nurture them.
Yeah. Nurture is such a great word too. I'm curious if you could say a little bit more about this idea of food insecurity or food deserts, because I think that's a big deal that isn't getting enough attention.
Yeah, if you
We're
think
all,
about the flyover states, the major cities, that there's people that are on food stamps or government support, and there's also people that are working, and the cost of organic produce and even regular produce is going through the roof. And produce is very seasonal. So you have many parts of the country in the world where they don't have access to fresh produce. So it's all being flown in, trained in, trucked in, and therefore it's expensive. And then if you think about, I remember when the CEO of McDonald's, and this is in my book with Dean Ornish, recommended putting salads on the menu at McDonald's. And they were charging $6 for the salad, but 99 cents for the burger. So you could get like 150 calories of the salad for $6, or you could fill up with 800 calories on the burger by getting that. And so what happens is the salad is nature created, and I'm sure McDonald's created a nice toxic dressing, to put on it to make it taste good. But the fact is the meat, the burger, the two all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on the sesame seed bun is really engineered to make you highly addictive, to blow your dopamine and serotonin receptors in the brain and make you want to keep eating and eating and eating. And what my life is, I eat sprouts and fruit, and I do no processed carbohydrates, no animal products, no added oils, no added salts. It's like when I'm eating food, like I'm tasting the food, and I could identify every sprout easily with my eyes closed, because of the texture, the flavor, the subtle aromas. And so I'm in tuned with this sprout level consciousness. And what I see is most people are like eating out of addiction, and they're eating to get full, and then they overeat because the food has the added salts, the oils, the sugars, the fats, the hydrogenated oils that basically, people aren't overweight because they want to be overweight. They're overweight because of a systemic issue. And it's not the lack of free will. It's just a systemic issue of that's what's available. That's what's hungry. That's what they've been brainwashed to do because of commercials. When they eat it, it tastes good. And then they can't stop eating it. So, of course, they're going to overeat it. And we're going to have the condition that we're in right now.
yeah. Well, I just love what you're doing, man. I really
Yeah,
do.
thank you so much, Jeremy. And I'm
Yeah.
glad you're into it. And this was so much fun. And thank you for giving me the platform to talk about myself, to talk about sprouts. No
Yeah.
gotcha questions.
Yeah,
Um,
man. Oh, there was a couple at the beginning I felt a little uneasy asking, but I really appreciate you sharing your past as well and some of your failures, quote unquote, and some of the challenges that you've overcome. It's been a real treat getting to know more about you, other than the wacky sprout guy that I see on Instagram. So I really appreciate that honesty and openness, man. And what's next for you in terms of like what's your edge at the moment, or what's something you're excited about?
I mean, I'm literally 2023. I am not that physically active. So I do a little running, I do some things like I want to be in top physical shape, not from like six pack abs and bodybuilder, but I want to be very limber. I want to increase my yoga practice. I want to strengthen my lungs. I want to be more physical with body exercises.
Yeah.
And I want to have more conversations and more enablement, about how to get more people sprouting. Like it's just such a obvious thing. And I feel that it's my calling and I have the voice and I have the experience to navigate this. So that's what my compulsion is to do in a very healthy way.
Love it, man. Sounds like you got to get Mike Posner out there and give you some workout tips. Guy
Oh
seems
yeah. I mean,
seems
I've been hanging with Posner the last 3 weekends in a row.
nice. It'll rub off on you. And I think to your point about the sprouting, one final sort of comment was I remember being so annoyed with the state of the world and the state of our society and culture that it's not commonplace and everywhere. It was one of those things that kind of really grinded my gears, so to speak. And
Uh-huh.
so happy to support you, man. Happy to spread the word. I'm going to keep doing it in my little bubble, but let's start the revolution together, man. Sounds great.
I I appreciate it. Well, Jeremy, you're doing great work and thank you for reaching out and call me a friend and feel free to reach out anytime.
Definitely, brother. Thank you.